Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. We've got lots to discuss today. It was an interesting game at the Olympics in Beijing late last night, and I'm a little tired this morning because of it being late last night. Jack Eichel's debut and a few other things, but we'll start off with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so let's talk about the NBA for a minute, because right before the All-Star break, Anthony Davis of the Lakers got hurt again. He went down in a heap. They had to help him off the court. They say, it's just going to be a few weeks. It's his ankle. And LeBron James looked like, when they showed him on camera, it was like, oh, man, there goes my playoff hopes.
Yeah, are you kidding me? Yeah, exactly.
And couldn't say that, right, because he cares about the guy. But Davis gets hurt a lot. And this is the problem with these super teams in the NBA. It sometimes works out for a year, and then other times when you are getting guys like Davis and Durant and Harden and these guys that are known to get hurt, or you took a guy like Durant when he was coming off of an injury and had to wait for a year just for him to play, these are sort of the risks. And it's just weird that a whole sport could hinge, or a whole team could hinge on one player getting hurt. But if Anthony Davis isn't there, the Lakers go nowhere.
Well, and I'll further that. Again, I'm no NBA expert, but I've heard enough. I've heard enough from guys like Bill Simmons, who covered the NBA and love the NBA, that the worst thing that the Lakers did was make the trade for Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook doesn't fit what they were doing. And if you add that, and he's like a $30 million salary, if you add that on top of Davis being hurt, and they've had to trade a bunch of assets to get Russell Westbrook, and I think it was Washington that they got him from, and the players that they traded are playing well in Washington, so it was a double whammy. Now, Kev, I think the poster child for the NBA is the cluster that had happened in Brooklyn, where they traded basically half the team to get James Harden, and in the span of less than a year, he said, I don't like this because I'm not the center of attention. And instead of just saying, I want to be traded, he got fat in the offseason and decided to do exactly what he did in Houston. Now he gets traded to Philadelphia, and he's got all the power in Philly. He's got an option to extend his contract 1 year for $42 million.
Yeah, well, that's
why I hate the NBA.
Yeah, well, I don't hate the NBA. I'm not a huge fan of it, but part of what they sell in the NBA is their kind of soap opera existence. And it works for them. Their following is huge. Their numbers are huge. They do really well. Their star power in the NBA is off the charts.
Yeah, it is.
We don't, I talk about this all the time, that, we don't do enough to promote our stars. We, other than a little bit of Crosby and a little bit of Ovechkin, a very little bit in comparison to other things, you can't write a headline on a story and put just the star's name and get a huge following. Like if you put LeBron or half a dozen other NBA stars in a headline, and you'll just get massive amounts of readership. So, part of sports, even though purists like ourselves aren't interested, is the marketing of the sport. And part of this is just all that drama that you just laid out.
I think we learned about a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, when they players ticked off China, that's where a lot of this extra money comes from, Kev. Like they make a lot of money from China. And I know the NHL is looking to do that someday, but they're nowhere near doing what the NBA can do with that money.
The whole Daryl Morey situation, that put a little skip in the pond of the NBA, because as soon as he made a pro Hong Kong statement, they broadcast the NBA, but they won't broadcast Houston Rockets games because of that comment, which is again, not to get into the political situation with the Beijing Olympics, but the ratings are significantly down from what they were 4 years ago, and I would have to think that was part of the calculation. Now, Russ, I want to quickly transition here to baseball, or the lack of news about baseball. Just 20 minutes ago, Ken Davidoff, New York, I think he's New York Post reporter.
Yeah, that sounds like the Post, yeah.
Reported the last bargaining session between the MLB and the MLB PA this morning lasted 15 minutes, and they went their separate ways.
Yeah, well, I tweeted yesterday that the date for baseball fans to look for is April 8th, because that's the date that minor league baseball opens. They're going to open on time, and you might as well go there and watch those players play. And actually, Kev, people are starting to ask for those games on their local networks. They are. Yeah. They're starting to tweet that. And I do think if this thing gets hauled out, like let's say for the first month, I think you will see some temporary deals so that there is baseball on TV. I really do.
But they won't be well watched.
No, I mean
probably not, but it's just something.
The S Network will carry the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders, but who the hell wants to watch?
No,
that?
they'll probably carry Staten Island. I bet you they do Staten Island instead.
They might mix that in too, but I bet you they're gonna show Scranton Wilkes-Barre. And one other thing, just Yankee related, Aaron Judge came out today and says if he doesn't have a contract before the beginning of the year, he's going to free agency. So he's holding the feet to the fire of the Yankees, and I think the Yankees are waiting to find out what the rules in terms of like the luxury tax are before they.
Okay, listen, this is funny now. We're now getting into comical territory, because if this were the Steinbrenner era, Aaron Judge would be signed. It wouldn't even be a question. It wouldn't matter if there was no sport for the whole year. Steinbrenner would pay the difference.
Right.
This new Yankee regime, they won't do that. Do they have the money? Absolutely.
Yeah. The one thing I would add to this, and I think this is important for our viewers to understand, and I learned this from both Donald Fear and Gary Bettman. And Donald Fear, of course, has many years of experience in negotiations in sports leagues, not just with the NHL, but of course, for those of you who are younger, he was king in the baseball world. Won a huge case in baseball. We tend as journalists to want to cover negotiations like through sporting events. We do it on this program. Every day Mike comes in and he's outraged over what's going on. And, you can't do that. Like, there's no 3 periods here. And as both Donald Fear and Gary Bettman had pointed out to me many, many, many times, it's not like that where someone's ahead and they're behind, and you can, tune in and say there was no progress today, so that's a bad sign. He said it is what it is. Like you just go and all of a sudden something happens, and the last negotiation, if you remember how it all worked down, it broke down. It was all horrible. Somebody called them back together 3 hours later, and by the next morning, we had a new deal going. Now, you could not have predicted that. There wasn't even time there was time for us to write that negotiations had broken down, because we did all write it. And then by next morning, it was all good. So, you can't think in those terms. Like, it doesn't really matter. I know it matters to Mike, but it doesn't really matter whether they talk 15 minutes today. At some point, they're going to get together on this, and it just depends on how entrenched they are over these major issues. And they are major issues.
They are, and they're pretty entrenched. Like, I could see, again, it reminds me of like 81, where we're going to be starting in mid-season. And that's why I honestly think that's why the owners extended the AAA season, because they knew they were going to be missing games for baseball, so they at least could make something. And I just feel like, Kev, it's going to be May, June, something like that when baseball resumes. It feels that way.
Yeah, so I've covered too many of these, so I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess. I do sort of sense that the issues here are significant. For that reason, I think you have to, err on, or you have to guess on the side that it will be lengthy, because they're important to both sides.
And I think, and Kevin, I think there is a split amongst the owners. I mean, they're all putting up a united front, but there are the small market owners, and then there are the big boys. And I'm sure the big boys want less of a luxury tax. Like, I heard something like $245 million for the luxury tax, which you may as well not even have a luxury tax if it's going to be that high. But then if there's a salary floor, then teams like Pittsburgh and Kansas City and all those teams are going to have to spend money that they haven't spent in years. So it's really an interesting thing.
I know one owner that doesn't care, and that's for the New York Mets. He would want it to start tomorrow.
Sure.
Because he doesn't care about how much money he spends, and he doesn't care about any of it because he has it. But I get that there's a lot of other teams that, they have issues.
I think it's also important to note that I think baseball people, and by people I mean the union, has a sense of their importance to sports history. They have always been the strongest union.
Yeah.
They have resisted a salary cap where others have not. They've entrenched and dug in won court cases. Marvin Miller, Donald Fear, they have a really great history. And I think they're cognizant of that. I feel like they take a harder line than other unions do. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how this all develops. But, that's how it'll happen. We won't know it. It'll just kind of all come together because people will get sick of it.
Yeah. All right.
So
let's get started because we have Kevin for a limited amount of time. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, February 17th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and happy birthday, goalie FP.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's start with the game last night. Let's start with the Olympics, and not the, not my call for justice and the fact that the Russian figure skater finished fourth, so she won't get a medal. The one who took the heart medication. Yeah. The story that we were focused on last night was the match between the U.S. and the Canadians in the gold medal game in Beijing. And Kev, I got the feeling right off the top because I thought, and the U.S. started off pretty decent. Then the Canadians took control, got the first goal. It was called on an offside. It was clearly an offside, but then they came right back and got a goal to make it 1-0 and extended the lead to 3-0 before the U.S. really gained their footing. And I mean, to me, Canada was dominant in the first half of the game, and the U.S. couldn't catch up.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that game felt less tighter than the ones we're usually seeing. I mean, it really felt it was Canada's, game. And, I felt all along that it was going to be a horrible loss, that Decker loss was horrible. And I gave my reasons yesterday.
You did.
I just think the competition is so tight between these two countries. And, they just have so many talented players that when you take one of them, especially the magnitude of Decker, I think it has, a big impact. And to be honest, I don't know that the goaltending measured up. I thought Canada was much better in goal, and that's too significant.
I did tweet, Kev, after the third one, pull the goalie. I wasn't thrilled with the second goal, but by the third goal, I did. Now, what I didn't know is that Alex Cavallini was playing with a torn MCL. So, Kev, here's what I would ask you. And I was more critical of the men's team than the women's team. I don't think they necessarily did anything wrong other than roll the dice on an injured goalie. But they had three really good goalies. Why did they go with an injured goalie?
Well, I think the answer is pretty clear. I think they felt that even injured injured, she was better than the other two.
Right. But do you think that that's the right decision? Like in the sense that, you knew that on that third goal, you could see she wasn't moving right. Like that was a bad rebound that she let up. Like, that from the inside. We don't know that as fans, but you know that now.
The second goal was the killer. I'm sorry. That was a really bad goal.
Yeah, I just don't know enough about the other goalies to comment. But
I mean, I know. Look, Maddie Rooney, we saw her in one of the earlier games. I know that she had just recovered from knee surgery. She had won the medal previously. She's healthy. Like, I get it. That was the only thing. But look, in that game, I thought it was great the way Hillary Knight scored the shorthanded goal and sort of brought the team back. They get the second goal with 13 and a half. You knew it was kind of too late at that point, but you did kind of feel like in that game, if there was 3 minutes to go, Canada might not have been able to hold them off, but that's the way that game went. So I my hat's off to Canada. I took my humiliation picture on Twitter. People can go see that on my timeline at Sportsology and enjoy. Yeah. Tara Sloan enjoyed it, and so did a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I didn't make a bet with Tara Sloan, so I of course put the American flag up there just to say, you may have won this battle, but you haven't won the war. And Kev, Greg Wyshynski wrote something on ESPN that I thought he had some salient points when it came to the rivalry right now. Now we know the U.S. has won 2 gold medals. They won in 2018. I think it was 98 was the first one, and Canada won 4 gold medals in a row. But he perceived that looking at the matchup in this tournament, that the divide between Canada and the U.S. has never been wider. That there was a turnover of some players like the Lamoureux sisters and a few others from the 2018 team, but that the depth, if you look at Canada with Poulin, with Spooner, with Nurse, and I'm not even chipping. I'm just chipping away at the talent level. That the U.S. the depth on their team, maybe it's a lack of experience because there's some young players, but really that the divide now has never been wider between the two squads.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, the World Championships, where are they at now? I mean, the U.S. had a big, they won a bunch of them in a row, and so yeah, I wouldn't want to say that. I think college hockey, women's college hockey, is still growing, although that benefits both countries.
Well, yeah, because Canada's best young player, Fillier, she plays at Princeton.
Yeah, they go there and they that extends their career a little bit. I still don't like that. They don't have a good option to extend their careers. And that's true in both countries. But I don't know. I'm
closer.
Yeah, but it's still not a good option. You can't. It's hard to make enough money. But I don't know if I'd go the step and say that the gap has never been wider, because as soon as you say that, like I think the U18 women's team, although we wouldn't know because they haven't played, but the COVID, but it's probably pretty good, and there's probably a lot of 17-year-olds. There's a lot of good youth girls hockey going on in this country as well. So that the thing that concerns me more is it'd be great if we could see other countries just improve a little more quickly than they have. I'm
going to go on a limb and say Greg's completely wrong here, because for one thing, we did have the Decker injury. The only injury Canada had, they got their player back. So if the U.S. got Decker back, he may not even been able to write that article. That's one thing. You did lose Lamoureux, but they, there were other young players in this lineup who were going to keep playing beyond that. Abby Roque was one of them. She was pretty damn good. They got Alex Carpenter back. They got Bozak back. Right. And they were both very, very good in this tournament. So I think he's 100% wrong, honestly.
But one of the points that he made was that the coach of the U.S. sort of did a David Quinn and relied too much on his veteran players. Like
that's true.
Yeah, and he didn't.
And Corinne is saying that in the chat room, and that's true.
Yeah.
The 5 defenseman thing is true. And I was never Quenneville used to do that, and I'm not a big fan of it. But I don't know if that's the reason they lost, because again, there was still it contributed.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to say there's such a talent gap, because I don't think there's a massive talent gap here. I don't. If there was, the game would have been like 6-0.
Yeah.
This is unrelated to the outcome, but I'm still bothered too that you have to go to a male coach.
Yes.
I mean, we need more women to stay in the game as coaches.
The NHL, the NHL is making more progress in terms of adding women to their management and coaching staffs than women's hockey is. I mean, you've seen.
I do want to answer the chat room and Jerkball. I'm not crying about this one injury, because I said I still thought they could win without it. Kevin said it would really hurt them, but even he said he thought they still had a chance. We actually have done the opposite. We have not really talked about that injury and saying, oh, well, because of that injury, that's not why they won this game. That's not how I started it off.
And consider this, Jerkball. It would be basically like Canada losing Poulin. That's how important Decker was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, injuries are what they are. I'm not one that gets overly, but in this case,
that's me. That's the one.
Yeah, in this case, it was a major injury, and the context of the injury. It was an ugly injury. She's a very popular player.
Yeah.
I know she stayed around, but we all know that's not the same. Yeah. And the difference between these teams is so small.
It is.
Injuries, get magnified. But if you I think the goaltending superiority of Canada in this was probably a bigger factor. I thought the Canadian goaltender was much better than the U.S. goaltender.
Nope, that's fair to say.
Okay, before Kevin has to go, let's talk about the big story in the NHL last night. We'll talk about some of the other games because there were some really good games and some things that I think, teams may have to worry about before the deadline or before the playoffs. But it was the debut of Jack Eichel last night against – they couldn't let him slip in against Arizona, Kev. They have him come out in his first game against the Colorado Avalanche. And, Russ and I were playing a little guessing game of how much he would play, and I think Russ said something like 10 minutes. I said 15. He played 17 minutes and 32 seconds, and did not have a point because Vegas lost 2-0 to the Avs. Did have a couple penalties, and people were saying that he was showing a little rust. And what did you think of what you saw of Jack Eichel in his debut?
Well, I'm struck by the fact that the worst part about his arrival is what everyone was excited about was the super line that we're going to create with Stone and Pacioretty, and Stone isn't there.
Right.
So, they're going to try to get this, that's going to be the line that's going to carry him in the postseason, but, we're not going to see that until the postseason. And, Eichel clearly had rust.
Yeah.
And it's going to take him a while to get back. And those are the kind of injuries we all know this, that just because you're back in the lineup doesn't mean you're really ready to go. Like, he's not sure. His timing is off.
Yeah.
So we'll wait and see how that goes. But, I understand why Vegas wanted to do it. If you can create, one of the best lines in the league, and I'm convinced they will be. They've got all the elements. They've got a goal scorer. They've, they got that gritty guy that's hard to play against, and now they're going to have one of the better skating centers in the league. So it'll be a great line. But right now, it's going to be bumpy.
Ross, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was watching him. I don't know if he really ever took a shot that went through, like that actually got through. So I could see he was there just he was just going to pass more on the power play. He was just passing. He was engaging a little bit in corners, but not tremendously. The skating was pretty good, though. The skating, look, I'm impressed just that the kind of injury he's come back from, that, that he could look halfway decent. I still, in the back of my head, though, kind of worry, and they did sort of make a mention on this in between periods, like, hey, there could be a point where he hits the wall a little bit, like 3-4 games, maybe has to sit one out because he hasn't played, and the adrenaline wears off. And that, I do think that's a legit thing. I do think that could happen.
He was understandably tentative. And rusty, and I think that'll get better with time. But, I question, and, they can do what they want, but I would have thought he would have been better served playing 2 or 3 games in Henderson.
I do too.
And they didn't do that. They, or if they were going to bring him in an NHL game, to not bring him in the game against arguably the best team in the Western Conference, bring him in against, I don't know what their schedule is, but bring him in against an easier opponent where he can sort of slip in a little bit instead of, matching up against McKinnon or Kadri or whoever he was matching up against. So that's where I quibble.
It's a difference. I will say this. It seemed like Jack Eichel did not want to play in the AHL, and that's why, and so I can't hold this on the Knights.
Sure.
It does seem like this was Eichel driven, that, right, Kev? Because we kept hearing, well, I'm in practice and I can't really see how I'm going to be, so I'm just going to play. So it did seem like he drove the bus on this. Yeah,
some guys don't want to go. They would rather just measure up to the competition that's there now. They don't, in Detroit, they're discussing whether or not you learn anything by playing in the Swedish league. And it's similar to that, where some NHL players saying, me going down and skating with the AHL players is not going to give me an idea of whether I'm going to be ready for up here. Let me just play against these people, and if I struggle, I struggle.
Here's what I would debate on the Swedish league thing. So if Lucas Raymond didn't play in the Swedish league and he'd have come over last year after, would he be as far ahead as he is now? Like, he's definitely ahead of the production. I don't think he would be.
Yeah, it's basically sort of boiled down to the management position of they're much better off by going and Sweden in the player position, which is it's so different that it's would I have been better off in the AHL or whatever. So it's sort of a management versus player thing.
Yeah, it's sort of hit or miss because I have knowledge of this exclusively with the Leafs because they've drafted so many Swedish players, like Timothy Liljegren, who had a rough time in Sweden as a 17 or 18-year-old leading up to the draft. They couldn't get him over to the American Hockey League quick enough because they wanted to make sure he was coached correctly.
Well, and remember, Mike, I told you recently on Twitter. Lassie, from who I work with at EP Rinkside, our European scout. I actually think he's in charge of European scouting. Sorry. He said he was used all the wrong ways there, and the Leafs definitely had to rescue him. But then you get somebody like Raymond, who the comfort level was probably so good playing over there.
Right.
You'd rather have him play over there and be comfortable, and then come over with all that confidence. I think that's the high wire act.
It is. I think it's player to player as well,
yes.
Because the Red Wings really think that Veleno gained by playing over there, and I think they think that Lucas Raymond did fine. But Berggren has come over, and when they sent him to Grand Rapids, they essentially said, that way you played in Sweden where you got all those points, we don't want you playing anything like that. You got to play completely different. I mean, really, they have said,
wow,
you got to completely change your game.
This could be why teams pick certain teams for their players to go to, Kev, because they know the coach, they know the system, and they feel like it aligns with theirs, right? We do hear about this a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair, but I think it really is sort of an individual case, and also I think it's the same is true for going down the AHL. Some guys just want to go to get their legs under them. Right. I mean, a legitimate conditioning stint.
Right.
Yes.
Where you're just playing in a game, you're playing at a high pace, you just get your legs going, you want to feel good, feel comfortable. They're not worried about the competition. And some guys are trying to go to get their timing right, and the game seems slow to them, and they don't want to go.
Yeah, and just final point before you have to go, Kev. The one concern that Eichel may have had is, okay, I go down to Henderson and I play against the Tucson Roadrunners, and some goon on the Roadrunners takes a run at me and hurts me. It's like I didn't even get a chance to get back to the NHL. He could get hurt just as easily in a National Hockey League game, but at least he's coming back and he's protected by his team rather than going down there and being a target.
Yeah.
And that's now maybe that's different nowadays because there's not as much targeting, but I think that's still something that's a genuine concern.
And, the sports, as much as it's a statistical win or loss type thing, as much as we want it to be black and white. I know Russ wants it to be black and black.
I do.
It is, but it's always gray. I mean, other than the wins and losses, which definitely are black and white, but it is always gray in terms of what's good for one guy isn't necessarily good for another. I always say before about, as people argue all the time about, whether a guy should go play college hockey or junior hockey, or whether you should go to the United States Hockey League, whether you should go to the National Development Program. I say, depends on who he is and, what he's trying to accomplish and what he needs to improve on. I mean, all of that stuff kind of matters, and it really does depend on each individual player about what's best for them. So,
well, as everybody knows, I love gray. So yeah.
Well, I will tell you this, Kev. If the Red Wings decide that it's not good to play in the Swedish league, then I'm not sure what Nick Lidstrom's doing over there. But that'll be a discussion for another day.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you misunderstood. I said the management position is good. It's the player position.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The management, like they've been very pleased with how things are going. Other than Berggren, they want to do something else. But
I mean, now I fully have it.
Yeah. So they like in fact. one of the stories that we're thinking about writing is, um, would you be better off sending some players over to Sweden instead of the American League? So for depending on who they are. So,
right.
Of course, when you come back, then maybe you tell them now you got to forget everything you learned over there.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I feel like Mason McTavish did himself a favor by going to the Swiss League rather than not playing at all. So,
yeah, I love Mason McTavish too. Like I think I'd have kept him in Anaheim.
It's a tough decision not to.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I really do. And I understand the contract situation and everything else. But, I think he'd be one of those guys that by the second half of the season, I think he'd be a beastly presence.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think, sometimes you've just got to convince yourself. I think one of the reasons why Lucas Raymond has been so successful is the Red Wings put him. Now, they were in a different position, obviously, because they were a poor team. But he played on the top line in his first NHL game, and he has not moved. Okay.
Which is unusual, though.
It really is unusual. But I'm saying, they were committed to that.
Right.
And he had a lot of confidence. He's playing with good players. You think it hasn't helped him that he's playing with Dylan Larkin?
Oh, yeah.
It has. And he was playing with Tyler Bertuzzi, who's now on the second line.
But that's what makes Seider's thing even more incredible than Raymond, because he's not even playing with someone like Larkin, and he's developing as their top guy. That's what makes him more remarkable. That's really.
Yeah, I just had a discussion today that I'm really surprised that Moritz Seider doesn't have much more support for the idea of being the favorite. But, the person I was talking to really made a valid point, and I should know better, having been so involved in the voting process. But, it's really not till the second half till the writers really get engaged and
and they start really looking at it.
Yeah. Because what does a half season mean? And it really doesn't mean anything. I mean, we write the mid-season rookie of the year, but what does that really mean?
It's true. That's a fair point.
Yeah, because it's really what you do in the second half that we all remember. So,
thanks, Kev. We know that you have to get some things to do today, so thank you for joining.
Yep. See you later, guys.
Thanks. Okay, Russ, just to further that, we're going to see a year or two down the line whether players that went over and played in Europe will have more success, even if it was a league that was a lower league. Like for example, Brandt Clark, we know, first round pick, the LA Kings. He went over and played in Slovakia. It wasn't a high level league. I think it was the second level league.
Yep.
Put up okay stats for in 20 some odd games, and now if you look, for Barrie, he's got 48 points in 38 games, and he's a plus 19. So he's having a good year, and the fact that he played instead of sitting on his hands, which he would have done if he stayed in Ontario, that probably is going to be beneficial. But if it's on a case by case basis,
right. And I'll give you the flip side. So Shane Wright didn't play anywhere. He just played the World Juniors, if I remember. Looked really good. And I just did an interview with him, and he took that time to work out and really get stronger and do all that, because as an OHL player, you generally don't have the time like the college player does to kind of work out during the week and play on the weekend, right? So he took that opportunity to work out, and for all that, and remember, there was bitching and moaning. Oh, Shane Wright's not doing well. Oh, he's not doing this, and he had a 4-point game the other night, and all of a sudden, shorthanded goal, and you look at him and you say, yeah, he's going to not only have a really good second half, but he's not moving out of that top spot.
Yeah, and at least like Bedard, who's the prospective top pick in the following draft, he played, the WHL played at least a few games. I think he played 15. Then he went over to the SHL, or at least their junior league.
Their junior, yeah.
And I mean, he's a generational talent. So he's going
offensively. This is I do have to say this, okay? For the people sort of wanting to dump on Shane Wright because he doesn't seemingly have the same offensive skills as Connor Bedard, that doesn't mean Shane Wright is not a better overall player. Connor Bedard has to work on a lot of other things in his game that Shane Wright doesn't have to work on. Shane Wright just can't do those highlight reel goals. There is a difference there. Jonathan Taves was a very boring player, but Jonathan Taves was a great player for a reason, because he impacted so many things in the game. And that's what Shane Wright's going to do. So you have to sort of pick that out. I know it's easier to pick the flashier player and say, hey, we're in that era now where video matters, and, Trevor Zegras. But, Trevor Zegras is not the best rookie in the league. He might be the most offensively talented or creative, but he's not the best.
And I don't want to put Wright in a slot or a category, but that's a lot of people said that about Nico Hischier, is that he was the number 1 pick overall in 2017. And he was not a spectacular blow off the door. He wasn't McDavid, he wasn't Matthews, but he's still a good player. And that he's more of a two-way guy, and maybe a number 2 center than a number 1 center. And that's the way things panned out in that draft. But it's not like he's a bad player. It's just he's not a spectacular, unbelievable star.
The difference here, though, is Wright is a much better offensive player than even Hischier was. But your point's still taken. Like, I get what you're saying otherwise, because Wright is going to be a top line guy. Yeah. So Hischier, I'm not sure was ever going to be a top line guy, but like you said, not a bad pick. But again, it never makes any sense to compare somebody for this year's draft to talk about somebody who's going to be drafted next year, because next year is next year. Like 2 years ago, Brad Lambert, maybe he was 3, was considered the number 1 pick in this draft.
Right.
And then, he wasn't. And so, you got to take it as it comes.
Okay. Touching on some events from last night, in watching that Avalanche Golden Knights game, we saw Nathan MacKinnon take out Nolan Patrick with a hit that, I don't know if it was purposeful to the head, but it was purposeful that he wanted to hit him. And there was a reaction from the Vegas, his teammates, trying to go after MacKinnon, and MacKinnon mouthing back at them. And Patrick went off the ice, and I don't believe he ever came back.
He never came back. And MacKinnon did tell him to shut the hell up or whatever, because I did watch it again to see what the interaction was. He wasn't hitting him in the head to hit him in the head, right? Mm-hmm. He was fighting to get to where the puck was, though. And if you noticed, Patrick did turn his head a little too. And I'm not trying to blame this on Patrick. I think MacKinnon should get a 1-game suspension. I don't think interference was the right call there. I think it should have been more than that, because I don't think MacKinnon did that saying, hey, I'm going to hit you with my fist in your head, and then you're going to go back and you're going to hit the ice. I don't think that was the plan. It was one of those things where it's a battle, and clearly Patrick, when he looked the other way, lost the battle. And now, based on what happened, and you could see even what happened in the game, that I do think MacKinnon should get a suspension for that, because, again, otherwise we're all going to say there's this hierarchy where great players not only don't get that much of a penalty call in the game, but then
we know there is.
And so this is only going to reinforce it if nothing else happens.
Yes. Yeah, we know there is. It's clear from Ovechkin. I even think you could say, Marchand maybe should be suspended more than he has been, and he hasn't been suspended as much because he's such a good player.
And we should say that, Kemper was amazing in that game.
Yes.
That was one of the best games I've seen him play in a while. Like, he was aggressive. He was coming out and making saves. Like, he was a big reason they won that game.
Yeah, I mean, again, I will continue to say this because I believe it. The only thing that will change the course of what Joe Sakic is going to do at the deadline is if Kemper or Francouz gets hurt. Otherwise, if they continue to be on a roll like they are, then he'll go into the playoffs with them as his tandem. And, if Kemper carries them a long way, then they probably try to re-sign Kemper to an extension in the offseason. They don't have a ton of cap space, but, and they have things to worry about. Like,
they're going to try and sign him. I think that's obvious.
But I'll say this. It's like, because there's a lot of trade talk about Colorado, and names like Byram, names like wait,
you're talking about
Newhook,
Alex Newhook,
Newhook or Byram. Those aren't the guys that are going to get moved. And Elliot Friedman said this morning that in regards to the Giroux context, with Colorado that the player that the Flyers are extremely interested in is Drew Hellison.
Yeah, Hellison's really good. You saw him in the Olympics. He plays for BC. I've watched him with the program. Very good skater, really good shot blocker, good puck mover, smart. He's got decent size. He, as far as offensively, I think he's like a better version, like more offensive version of like a Justin Braun. I think because he could do a little bit more offensively. Like he could run your second power play, but you're not going to expect a ton out of him for that. And I don't think at the NHL that's necessarily his role.
No,
but he could be a second pair defenseman.
Yeah, I was going to say he projects as a mid-pair guy. And if you have York and you have Provorov and you have, so that. And
I personally think like I would ask for Sean Behrens because he's more creative offensively and could actually run your power play. But because, again, they still don't really have anybody to do that.
Right.
But in the end, Hellison would be a nice pickup. I think it has to be Hellison and Kaut, though. I'm not making the trade unless it's those two.
And a number one, probably.
No, they don't have a number one.
Because they traded it for Kemper. That's right.
Right. But that's okay. I'll take those two players, Mike, because in the end, one of them is going to play at next year. He'll finish out the year in the AHL. Maybe you bring him up for a couple games this year. And then Hellison, there's a chance he could play in the NHL next year. You have to see what he looks like at the end of the season. You sign him, you put him in the A, and you see. But you have to know if you're trading for Hellison, his advisor has to sort of give you the nod and the wink that he's going to sign with you.
Right.
You can't make this trade, and then all of a sudden it's the rights to Drew Hellison because then that kills the trade.
Now, making up for the lack of drama that is clearly apparent in the East, where know.
What do you mean lack of drama, Mike? Come on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the Islanders are they're gonna win 12 in a row, and they're gonna crawl right back into the race. Sorry, not happening.
No, you got to do it better than that. You only showed it's.
There you go. It's like the moving screen. But I'm telling you right now, if you look at the West, and we had two games last night that factor into what is going on in the West right now. The race for, I would say, the final two spots in the Pacific and the two wild cards are up for grabs. And so last night, Winnipeg beats the Wild 6-3. Scheifele with a hat trick.
I told you Winnipeg's was going to get on a little bit of a roll after that locker room.
They're too good of a team to be this bad.
Yeah.
I think they're going to crawl back in the race. The Flames are on a roll. They beat the Ducks 6-2. If you look at the standings right now, the Ducks and the Kings are playing 500 hockey.
Yeah, they're starting to fall a little bit.
I mean, 500 is okay, but you need to string together.
Do you feel confident in the Ducks? I don't.
No. And if they fall 6 or 8 points out of a playoff spot, they're going to trade their rentals.
Yes.
And that's why
that would be the best thing for them because it's good that they got close. They've got great young talent. They've got a goalie. That would be the next thing in their succession.
But right now, okay, so Vegas has 59 points. Third place, right now Nashville and St. Louis are going back and forth between third place in the division and first wild card. There's about a 5-point gap between Nashville and the second wild card. So let's just say Nashville is in it at this point. But Vegas has 59 points. Edmonton, because they played less games, have 55 points. And then LA, Anaheim, 55, Dallas, 54, Winnipeg and Vancouver, 50. At that
point, they're all in it, and they're all going to say they're in it.
Right. The only, even San Jose is saying maybe we're in it, but I think that they're really not. And
no, I don't think they are either. But on their broadcast, they were kind of hinting that they're in it. The one thing about this is on SiriusXM, and I don't know, I didn't get to hear the full context, but apparently someone's now saying like the Flames could be the favorite to come out of the West. I would not say that. I still would not put them as the favorite to come out of the West.
Well, I wouldn't either because I still believe in Colorado, and I know that you believe in Minnesota.
I believe in the Wild, but I also think Colorado's better too. They would be my next one after that.
And Vegas, if they get everybody back, then if Leonard is healthy and Stone is healthy, and
Eichel, one more thing about Vegas. Okay, so after watching them, look, Colorado's a really good team, right? And Chandler Stevenson was having a really good game, but he's not as good as like what Eck wants to make him out to be. And Eck just gets excited about some guys. But Chandler Stevenson is not a game-changing No, but he's not a game-changing player, and you saw it yesterday. And so my worry about Vegas is I don't think Jack Eichel is going to be close to the Jack Eichel that you saw in Buffalo his first couple of years. I don't think he's going to be a point-a-game player this year. I don't think it's possible. So if that is the case, you do have to sort of look at Vegas and say, okay, where else is their stuff coming, their scoring coming from? And again, best guy on the ice for them was Riley Smith. You trade him, right. I don't know if they're going to go far in the playoffs at all.
Well, I think it's a cumulative effect with them. It's, okay, so it's Stevenson, it's Carlson, it's Marchessault, it's Smith, it's Pacioretty and Stone. It's like it's not all on the shoulders of Eichel. They sort of have, scoring by committee. And if that works for them, then they could make it. But I think that's all dependent on them getting good goaltending from Leonard in the playoffs, and we'll see. That's not 100% guaranteed. Now the Flames beat Anaheim yesterday 6-2. They're in first place, and they're only in first place by 6 points. So it's not like actually, excuse me. They have 61. Vegas has 59. Calgary has 62. Excuse me. Vegas has 59 and Edmonton has 55. So they've opened up a little bit of space, but not so much that they can say screw you. No. So that's going to be interesting. Now the other game, and I watched a lot of this one, Russ, was Carolina, Florida, and as soon as I saw the goal that Barkov scored, I was waiting for your text to say, "There's Freddie."
You got it though, right? You saw it.
Yeah, I know. And it was okay. That was the typical soul-crushing Freddie Anderson bad goal that we usually see in the playoffs, and when he struggles, sometimes during the regular season, we see that as well. I was always a defender of Frederik Andersen, saying that it was more the Leafs defense that was exposing him. But that excuse is out the window with Carolina. If he does it again for them, and they lost Carolina lost 3-2 to Florida. Florida keeps rolling. But that's got to be a concern for Rod Brind'Amour, is that if playoff Freddie shows up.
Yeah, and I was watching that game, and I did have to message you, and that's when I, eventually fell asleep for a little while so I could stay up for the next game. But I saw Anderson give up 2 bad goals in that game, and that was the difference in the game. And this is the part that could kill Carolina's season again, because they got a goal out of D'Angelo. He just kind of shot it on net. It went in. They got a little puck luck with that. Florida's the better team. They're the better all-around team. But the difference that could make Carolina better than Florida is they get top-notch goaltending, because then the defense looks really good for Carolina and they have enough offense. But if their goaltending is going to be like average, NHL average, they're not going to go as far as they're supposed to.
Yeah. Some big news regarding the World Junior. The IIHF came out this morning and discussed the future of the World Junior, and announced that the tournament that was postponed in January will be replayed from the beginning in the middle of August, which is a few weeks before the beginning of NHL training camps. So the question
after the draft.
And after the draft. Now, the question is, since it's a completely new tournament, you're not starting up from where it began, that gives Canada and Sweden and all these teams the carte blanche to have completely different rosters. But the question is will NHL teams allow players? I think the example that I heard on one of the talks, will the LA Kings allow Quentin Byfield? If Quentin Byfield is still eligible at age 19, will they allow him? Because it's not during the season, it's before training camp. It's actually, they could get going a month before. I don't think the teams are going to risk their prospects to play in a tournament.
Some of them won't, especially the ones that feel like they could really compete. And I think they would hold Byfield back. It would even be interesting to see if Shane Wright were to play in this.
Right. Right, exactly, and not making a pun there, but right, no. I don't know.
And the players want to play. Let's just get this straight. I mean, I just interviewed Shane Wright and Brad Lambert, and they want to play when there's the next World Juniors, but sometimes the teams will talk to them and talk about the path. Now, so that's what I'm getting at.
Because remember, when they postponed in late December, it was late December, when they postponed the tournament, the original talk was they were going to play it in June. Yes. And okay, that meant during the Stanley Cup final, right before the draft, like a couple weeks before the draft, and right when the NHL draft combine was going on, around that time in Buffalo. So they obviously were told that didn't work because it would be taking attention away from the NHL, from their signature events. And right up against the draft, maybe players wouldn't want to risk getting hurt a week or two before the draft and affect their draft status. So, I mean, they obviously changed where they were going.
Edmonton's going to have a lot of summer hockey because the Hlinka is going to be played there. Yeah. I don't have dates yet. And then the World Juniors. So it's going to be like 20 days of hockey.
Yeah, and the other thing that they announced was the World Women's Under 18 will be played in June, but they didn't specify where. They said in the north of the USA. This sounds like to me like North Dakota or something like that.
Yeah, I could see it at the rink in North Dakota.
Yeah,
which I'm never going to go to again because I had to eat Jimmy John's every day, and F that place.
I thought the best place was TGI Fridays or something like that, wasn't it?
No, that was like when you could get away from the rink and actually go to a place. But when you're like waiting in between games and you have to run over, it was we had to go to Jimmy John's.
If you eat at Jimmy John's, you better have an ample supply of Alka-Seltzer and Gas Axe because that place sucks.
Lucas Ackroyd knows. He went with us most of the time, and he writes for the IIHF, and we still joke about it.
Yes. Okay. Talk about it just because I wrote about it yesterday and I was talking about it with Russ and just the strangeness of the NHL waiver wire. Okay. So yesterday the Maple Leafs claim Adam Brooks off of waivers, former Leaf. He was claimed off of waivers by Montreal right before the beginning of the season. He played in Montreal for about a month, played, I think, for 4 games. Was placed on waivers. The Leafs wanted to reclaim him, but Vegas was ahead of them in the order of waivers, and they picked him up. And he played 7 games for them between the middle of November until the end of December. And then he got hurt, and he was playing conditioning stints in Henderson. They placed him on waivers, and the Leafs claimed him yesterday. And they were talking about how. Jason Spezza talked about how he stayed in touch with Adam Brooks and Sheldon Keefe talked about how he's coached him for a number of years and he didn't have any input in it, but he liked Brooks as a player and all this stuff. And the waiver wire comes out today, and Adam Brooks has been placed on waivers. So clearly, the Leafs want to get him down to the American Hockey League so he can play. He's an injured player coming back, or he's just coming back from an injury. The question is whether they can get him through waivers 24 hours after he had been placed on waivers in the first place. Probably it's going to happen, but if there's a team out there that the thing is,
I think it's going to happen because of lack of interest in him. Honestly, I think that's ultimately
he's a fourth line guy. He's he's a good teammate. He's 25 years old, but I think it's the fact that he's coming off an injury. And I think Toronto Toronto is like 4th or 5th last in waiver claims. They're probably rolling the dice that the 4 teams ahead of them or below them aren't going to put in a claim for Adam Brooks, and that everybody else who passed on him 2 days ago will pass on him again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I just thought that was curious. Okay,
I just want to let you know, Mike, that I'm tweeting to you because for GTS, I just wrote an article on Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So I thought you might want to keep up with what I think about him, and maybe others on Twitter do too. So I'm tweeting it to you.
Yes, I'll definitely retweet it and take a look. And I'm just pulling it up right now to see what he's done in Rochester since being sent down. I know that right now, it's Craig Anderson and Dustin Tokarski playing in goal. That fantastic pairing. Right now, Luukkonen. See, this is what I mean. Luukkonen played fairly well, but for a bad team with the Sabres, his save percentage was .917. His goals against was 2.74, and he lost 7 of 9 games. Okay, so he's sent down to Rochester. In Rochester, he's above 500. His goals against is over 3, and his save percentage is .894. I'm not bringing him up until the end, until after the deadline if they trade Anderson or Tokarski. But that's just me. I think you're exposing him to a bad team. If,
you already gave him the confidence for the time that you put him up this year. Don't you want him to go and play in the playoffs in the AHL and have that team go to the playoffs and go on a big run and let him be a part of that and maybe win a Calder Cup? Isn't that better than just satisfying a few more games with the Sabres? Like, I just don't get it.
I know he's 22 years old, but he missed a year, almost a complete year with injury. Yep. He really he's played a total of 11, 25, 39 games in the AHL. That's half a season. That's not enough. Ryan Miller played more in the AHL before he came up. Okay, let's take some questions here before we end the show. Lucky Me asks, for the Flyers coaching search, we know that the fans want Tocchet, but do you see Philadelphia going with somebody like Tippett or not Tippett or
no way Tippett? I mean, Jim Montgomery could be a very interesting one. I've had dealings with him. I think he's very smart. He was doing a good job until things happened, and we know what those things are. And if he's truly back to he's got things under control, Montgomery could be a really great choice for them.
Until I hear otherwise, I still would. And I don't know if there's any connection with them, but I would think Torts has got to be in the mix, don't you? I mean,
he's in the mix. He'll get interviewed.
Torts in Philadelphia just makes too much sense.
No, he'll get interviewed because if nothing else, Clark and some of those other ones will definitely push him.
Now, I don't know whether they want to go down the road of the ex-Ranger coach a second time in a row, but
I don't think that should matter, honestly.
Right. Johnny Red, if the Oilers don't make the playoffs, will McDavid or Draisaitl ask for a trade, and where would they want? Okay,
not yet.
I'm not going to read their minds and say where would they want to go. The only thing I could see how it would change is if Holland doesn't make the move for the goaltender. Mm-hmm. If he says, I'm going to go with Stuart Skinner down the stretch, and they miss out because the goaltending wasn't good enough, then I think McDavid and Draisaitl will say, what the hell's going on here? We know.
I think there would be a meeting. I do think there would be a meeting with, them and their representation. And I think they would give the Oilers one more year. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And it would be separate meetings. I don't want to say they'd be together talking to, no, it'd be separate kind of meetings.
Okay, Funky, I have to bring this up. Funky is saying Little Caesars pizza is the worst cardboard abomination from hell.
I mean, when it's hot, it's not bad. I mean, is it great pizza? No. If you're getting it.
I have to say, I've never had Little Caesars.
I'll tell you a time that I had it, and I've had it once or twice in my neighborhood when I'm just passing by and I need something quick to eat. But is it great pizza? No. But we had it. We were at the Joe. It was during the Winter Classic, the night before the NHL has a big party, and the Zach Brown Band was playing there. So free food, free booze, free everything. So we walk in there, and we're getting pretty liquored up, and all of a sudden there's Little Caesars Pizza, and me and a few other people from Sirius and of other writers. Did we think at that point in time that the pizza tastes bad when it was red hot? No, we actually ate it, and we were like okay with it.
Yeah, I've never had Little Caesars. I've had Pizza Hut. I've had Domino's.
I think it's better than Pizza Hut, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, no, pizza. Like I said, Pizza Hut. Make sure you take a Prilosec before and after. It absolutely destroys me. It's bad.
I'll tell you something that's interesting. I interviewed an actress that I know, Jen Lilly, more than a few times, and she told me that because of her kids one time, when Domino's said they changed their way of doing things, She ordered Domino's, and it really was decent. And I was like, so on my recent trip to Michigan, I was kind of like stuck at a hotel that was in an area that didn't have a lot of food. It was like a food graveyard. And I noticed that there was a Domino's and some other place you don't know. And so I said, all right, I'm going to taste test the Domino's. And you know what? It was decent. It used to be, I had it in college and I thought it was garbage.
Yeah.
The Domino's now, it actually was edible. It was
it's passable. I equate Pizza Hut and Domino's with the rectangular pizza you used to eat when you were in school. It's like, that cardboard pizza with the 2 pieces of pepperoni. That's about how good it is. It's not, it will fill your stomach, but it's not exactly pleasurable. Speaking of fast food, according to Silent Night, can't handle Subway, awful. Well, most of those establishments are. It goes without saying. Okay, I've eaten Subway twice in my life. Once with Russ when we were going to Chicago, and it was a turkey sub. And I don't know, can anybody screw up a turkey sub? Subway almost did. I barely got it down.
Yeah, Subway's is bad, but like there's some decent places. Like Popeyes does have good chicken. Their chicken sandwich is good. Chick-fil-A is good. So you can't say it's all bad. You just have to know where to go.
Let's see here. Just we're going down the junk food here. I can't remember the last time I had BK or McDonald's. I've been to White. Okay, I've never had White Castle. So Russ, you're gonna have to tell me how bad White Castle.
All right, so I don't eat red meat anymore, right? But White Castle's burgers were these little square things that they cook with the onions already on the roll, and unless you have been heavily drinking, you are going to guaranteed to get heartburn. If you're drunk already when you eat it, then really nothing's going to happen to you that wasn't going to happen to you from what you already imbibed. So just know that when you get White Castle.
I don't know if this is common around the country, but around and obviously with the pandemic, these places don't stay open till late as they used to. But in Buffalo, the bars close at 4:00 in the morning, or they used to. And there were a few establishments that would stay open basically until 5 to get the drunks coming out of the place. And one of the places was like Texas Hots, which was basically hot dogs, and they would pour this like almost like chili type of a mixture on top of the hot dog. You have to be drunk to eat that crap.
Yeah.
The most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Like me, I'm ordering a plain hamburger while all my drunk friends are eating I call them shit canoes because that's what they look like.
One last thing. Put up Thomas Smith's question. This is a really good question.
Okay. Is that
Daniel Walcott?
Oh yeah. Okay. I see it. Hold on. Go continue.
So he was a draft pick of the Rangers, and I followed him, and I felt like he had some raw talent, raw ability, good speed. He's not the biggest guy. He's like 5'11", and the fact now that he's on the taxi squad, he's a third pairing, and could actually maybe, like Thomas is asking, could he be on the Lightning? I don't know if they would use him this year, but he is the kind of guy that they get good player development out of. And if they do, could he be like a fill-in guy on their third pair next year because of the salary? Yeah. And Walcott's got a little bit of offensive ability. So it was interesting. He was just one of those guys that was always going to take a while. But I've kind of tracked Daniel Walcott, and I think you're right, Thomas. There's a possibility for that, but I think it's next year.
Well, I don't know. He's played one NHL game. He's only got 7 points. With the crunch, so not a lot of points.
But he's not like a big offensive defense. He can move the puck.
He's a winger.
A winger. Sorry, I'm sorry. What did I say? Defense. But he can move the puck. He's fast.
Well, Thomas said he's a third. I don't know if he's played both, but I don't think.
No,
so.
He was a winger when he was drafted. No, Mike. He's a defenseman. I just double checked it.
Well,
you're screwing me out.
Hockey DB has got him as a left winger.
Well, this is Hockey DB. I mean.
Okay. Well, okay. One thing in terms of him being a replacement to replace a guy like Jan Ruda. Jan Ruda is playing with Hedman, and there's a reason he's playing with Hedman. He's a right shot. Hedman's a left.
All right, we are both right. He was drafted as a winger and then has switched to defense.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, so is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible.
Alexander says, would you support a rule change where if a shorthanded team scores a goal, their penalized player comes out of the box immediately? That's something that I've heard Jeff Merrick talk about on his podcast. I don't have a problem with keeping the full 2 minutes for a power play. That was the rule that was undone because of the Montreal Canadiens in the 1950s. They were scoring so many goals on power plays that they said, okay, as soon as they score a goal, the power play is over with. So, I mean, right now, what's the highest percentage is what, 33%?
Yeah.
I'd keep it as 2 minute majors, but I'd also do this. If the shorthanded team scores a goal, then the penalty is over with.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, here you go. Patrick Kane to the Rangers in the offseason with salary retention?
I don't think it's going to happen, no.
Esmir, what could the Devils get back by trading Pavel Zacha since his name has been brought up lately? I know that Elliot Friedman brought him up in terms of connection with the Canucks. I know that he said that the Canucks are interested in Zacha. I believe he's 1 year away from UFA, and that's the reason why if the Devils are trading him, it's like he probably wants a long-term deal, and if they're trading, that means they don't want to give him a long-term deal.
Right. I think you can get a second-round pick for him. Zacha's a pretty good player. There's still some offensive upside. He has continued to get better at a slow pace. I think there's still some raw ability there that hasn't come out.
Okay, Jerkball, I'm looking for places in Toronto that are like, because Pizza is essentially, to my estimation, a Canadian version of Pizza Hut. It's not great. So I've had Pizza Nova before in Toronto. It's okay. There's a Pizza Aiolo that's okay, but I prefer.
Listen, it's Toronto. Are you really expecting great pizza in Toronto?
Well, there's an Italian neighborhood.
There's an Italian place everywhere, Mike, but it doesn't mean it's good.
In those Italian neighborhoods, there is good pizza. So
not always. No, that's not always true.
Okay, Terry 3G, the. Where's Nick Ritchie's destination?
Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Arizona or Buffalo. Probably, I would favor Arizona, and the reason. Okay, here's the reason: Arizona has so many UFAs, and they have so few players under contract next year. Nick Ritchie is an NHL player. He's not a great NHL player, but he's an NHL player. They need bodies. They have a ton of draft picks. I don't think the Leafs are getting anything more than a 7th round pick for him. They're trading him for cap relief. So I think that's the reason
Arizona.
why. And so I'll say Arizona. There might be a few other teams that
it'll be a 2nd round pick and Nick Ritchie to Arizona, and Michael get mad.
Yeah, a 2nd round pick and Nick Ritchie for a 3rd round pick.
Right.
Something
and
like
Michael
that.
get mad that day.
No, that's
I
fine.
will predict.
That's fine because a 2nd round pick from Arizona, as long as it's Arizona's pick, a 2nd round pick, or it's Toronto's.
They have 1,000 picks. It might not be.
Right, but I'm saying they have, Toronto's 2nd will be in the 20s, and if they trade a 3rd back to them, then that pick will probably be at the top of the 3rd round. So it's not.
No, but it won't be theirs. It'll be somebody lower.
Well, then I'm not doing the deal. Screw.
Well, you're not the one doing the deal, and then you'll be the one bitching about the deal.
Let's see here. Thomas, there's an Italian restaurant near UBS that's amazing. Salvatore. Okay, I'll just say this. There is a Salvatore's in Buffalo. It is not the most amazing, so I hope it's not the same family. It is not the most amazing Italian.
Listen, Long Island has a very good Italian food base. I used to go to this place called Caruso's. It used to be on Hempstead Turnpike in Levittown, right near the not too far from the roller rink when that was around. I would take Thomas's word on this because there's a lot of good Italian food on Long Island.
And finally,
it's garbage. Nobody should eat it.
Pizza is disgusting.
It's horrible.
I mean, please.
Who cares if somebody in Canada invented it? There's all kinds of bad inventions out there.
Ham and pineapple on a pizza is an abomination. It really is. Yeah. So, sorry, you're wrong. Okay, we'll end the show there. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Kevin Allen. For Russ Cohen, I'm Mike Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.